Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 218 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book came out in November. It's called From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing. So go and pick that up on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, our next guest actually loves working with animals. Now, I've never worked with a killer whale like ever. However, I do have two Siberian cats that are the king and queen of our home. We've had our male cat Klondike for about a year and a half. Many of you who listen to the show have seen Klondike on our social media accounts. And we just adopted a brand new female Siberian cat called Coco. She's actually a year and a half old. So they're both fixed. Don't worry about kittens anytime soon. But thank goodness for our pets, because I don't think our family would have been able to handle the isolation from a mental health perspective over the last 2 years without them. That is absolutely 100% certain to me. Our next guest is Amanda Young, a best-selling author, mental health advocate, and a podcast host. When life threw her a massive curveball resulting in the loss of her dream job, Amanda used that moment to pivot her mindset instead of dwelling on the misfortune. She's used to that setback to help set up dreams she never thought were possible, becoming a best-selling author who uses her voice to inspire conversation surrounding mental health, breaking societal norms, and advocating for inclusivity. After her bipolar 2 diagnosis in 2021, Amanda learned the necessity of speaking up and has been using her voice to advocate towards mental health awareness and acceptance. Using her voice, regardless of who is listening, truly has become Amanda's superpower, one that she is extremely proud of. Each day, Amanda shows up for her community that she's built online and in person to inspire everyone that their setbacks could in fact become set-ups for something even better. It has been far from the picture-perfect life that she had planned, but Amanda has come to own that the worst moments in her life launched her into a new and honorable dream, and I am totally in for what Amanda is selling, because the same thing is true about me. Welcome to the show, Amanda Young.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Oh my God, the pleasure is all mine. And you know what? Listen, I've had a ton of setbacks in my life. Let me just tell all the college students that are listening right now, there is going to be a setback in your life. I promise you it is going to come. The question is, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to pivot into the next chapter of your life? And so I am just so glad that you're here to talk with our listeners. Let's take a step back. Let's go back in time. You decided on the University of South Florida for your undergraduate experience. Why USF?
Yeah, go Bulls, first of all. Go Bulls. I'm born and raised in Dallas, Texas, actually, and my dad's company got bought by ESPN, and that's what brought us to Florida. We moved literally weeks after I graduated from high school. They were just like, hey, we're moving. You can come with us or you can stay home. And I took that as an opportunity, even though it felt uncomfortable, to just start fresh somewhere new. I had created some drama where I was living, and I was like, hey, yeah, time to get out. So I chose USF because honestly, they gave me the most money. If I'm going to be real honest, when it comes to scholarships financially, they also had an honors college program and a provost scholars program. So I took a year off between high school and college, and getting to do an accelerated 3-year program was definitely something I was looking for. So yeah, I made USF my home, and I'm happy that I did. I'm happy that I ended up there.
Sounded like a good choice for you to kind of start a new adventure in Florida. So that clearly worked out very well for you. And it's a wonderful institution. So, I have nothing but good things to say, and certainly a very thriving fraternity and sorority system. You joined Sigma Delta Tau sorority. So what was special about the members of Sigma Delta Tau that made you want to join?
Yeah, so I remember going through recruitment and getting caught up in a moment of all of the different choices and meeting all these incredible women that seemed like they were thriving. But when I interacted with the women of Sigma Delta Tau, I just got this sense of transparency and just overall realness. And not to say that any of the organizations weren't, but they were flat out honest. They were like, look, we're not the most popular, we're not this, but we win intramural sports, we care about each other, and a typical day here is watching Grey's Anatomy on the couch with pizza. And for me, whose family members had never been part of Greek life, I was like, hey, they sound like real women, and this doesn't sound intimidating, but it sounds like they're competitive, and that seems like the sorority for me. And it was a great fit. I got involved right away and held leadership positions within the sorority and really just found like my niche within Sig Delt.
I love it. Authentic conversations. This is the biggest lesson that our listeners can learn about, because I see these recruitment videos and I'm looking at like speedboats out of Miami and I'm like, that's not real. Like, that is not an everyday occasion for this sorority. I don't care who you are. So let's not make it part of what, we're selling to say we're going to lure you in with speedboats. Like, that's not real. Let's talk about having pizza and watching Grey's Anatomy, in our sweats, because that's something I can identify with. And you know what? Gen Z wants honesty. Gen Z wants transparency. Just be real with me and I'm going to gravitate to you. But I sometimes feel like we're putting on such a show that I'm like, this isn't even real.
Well, and the terrifying thing is again, none of my family members ahead of me had ever been in Greek life. So I was not a legacy. I had no idea what to expect coming in. Instagram was not what it is now. So I could not stalk these sororities online. I had no idea. I went in blind. And I kid you not, when those doors opened and the clapping and singing started, I was overwhelmed and instantly was like, I don't think I want to do this. Like, I heard it's great for connections and I want to build my resume and network, but oh my God, I don't know.
I understand completely. I mean, listen, my parents were from another country. They certainly didn't have fraternities and sororities there. So I was the first person in my family to join a fraternity or sorority for that matter. And you know what? To this day, I still don't think my parents know what a fraternity or sorority is. And this is like literally like my whole life, right? So I totally get where you're coming from. Let's talk about your dream job, because in 2019, you had it working with killer whales. What was
Yeah.
your goal in working with the killer whales and also the people that work with these animals every day?
Yes. So, cliche story, ever since I was a little kid, the first time I went to SeaWorld, I looked at my mom and said, I'm going to do that someday. And it's just very matter of fact, not like, oh my God, it's my dream job. It's like, no, I'm going to do that. And if you know me, and once you get to know me, you realize like when I say something out loud, it's going to happen. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do everything in my power to achieve that. And so I did. I made sacrifices in college and high school and skipped fraternity and sorority socials because I was at my internship and working multiple jobs to afford dues to be able to still do this job that I wanted to do. And I achieved it at 25, which is astounding because it took years and years of effort. And honestly, Michael, I felt like I was on top of the world. I had the biggest ego and I was like, nothing can touch me. It's only up from here. I am amazing. And heavy the fall. Heavy the fall. My head was so big that it took one tiny phone call to completely alter the rest of my life. And yeah, I remember waking up to that phone call where HR called me and were like, hey, Amanda, you're not needed anymore. Your position's been eliminated. Don't come back to work. And for someone who had created their entire identity around being a killer whale trainer, it was life shattering. Now, you asked about the goal of working with killer whales and working with those people. I always had a heart for animals. I always had a heart for conservation. But right when I was about to get into college, Blackfish came out, this huge documentary that was very emotional and did a good job of what their goal was to get you think twice about how animals are cared for in facilities. Now, I learned really quickly on that a lot of the things they claimed in that documentary were not actually true. And so that's when I started using my social media accounts to give a behind the scenes and to humanize the people that were dedicating their lives to caring for these animals. And regardless of how you felt about the topic of animals in captivity, the reality is they're there and there's people that are working hard and who are experts at what they do. And we need to be able to humanize them. So that's when I started my Instagram more seriously than just posting food photos, was giving these animal facts, giving a behind the scenes of what it was like to really work with these animals.
Thank you for sharing that, because I know there are those documentaries that are out there that
Yeah.
show one side of it. And I know some of that stuff isn't true because I know other people that also work in the industry. And that's like the furthest thing from the truth for many of them. So they're like, that's not even accurate, right? So thank goodness that you're sharing that information. But I mean, when you were laid off, right, and this is all of your identity, and again, you and I have very similar stories. But I mean, it's a part of you. Like, you can't take that
Yeah.
out of you. It's a part of your blood. It's a part of your makeup, right? And now you're laid off. So now you're really struggling with your mental health, but you decided, instead of hiding it, that you were going to share your journey online and to start building this community around mental health. So talk to us a little bit about what you were doing at that point.
Yeah. So that is when I can really pinpoint. And I got laid off in 2019. So that summer is really when this initiative on Instagram was, hey, mental health, let's talk about it. And before, it was extremely taboo. And after getting laid off, I was officially diagnosed with depression and generalized anxiety. And I started medication then, and I started opening up about, hey, you all think that I've achieved these great things, and I have, but my brain's not perfect. My life's not perfect. I'm really struggling with what's going on. And I'll admit to you, I wasn't 100% honest and open because a lot more was going on that I didn't even know was happening. So I was talking about depression, anxiety. Let's talk about it. Let's destigmatize it. But I had no idea what was underneath the surface and about to rear its head in a couple years.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, because especially, Instagram, TikTok, I mean, you look at all the filters that are out there. I mean, half the stuff isn't even real. There's like literally TikToks to show how BS all of this stuff is, because it's almost
Yes.
comical. I mean, they're almost like, this isn't even me.
Yep.
You have one idea of who I am based on my Instagram photos or my TikTok videos, but the reality is, as soon as I turn this filter off, you're going to see a totally different person. And just to build people's awareness about the fact that, what you see on the outside might not necessarily be who I really am on the inside. So, we can go down that rabbit hole of, social media, the impact
Yeah.
that it has on mental health, especially for college students, because you're constantly comparing yourself to somebody else's best day on Instagram. And what does
Yes.
that feel
Yes.
like over time, right? Unbelievable. So later in 2020, then you ended up contracting COVID-19. So now you're forced to be alone at home. And all of these mental health issues that we're talking about are now kind of piling up one on top of another. And so now daily panic attacks were happening to you. So talk to us about some of the things that you were going through at that time.
Yeah. So again, I got laid off from the killer whale job in 2019. Almost to the day in 2020, I got temporarily laid off from my next job, which was working with elephants and rhinos. And almost a year to the day, I'm in the same position on the couch having this crisis. And my husband looks at me and he goes, Amanda, what haven't we learned the first time that we're here again? Like, we thought we learned, we were on meds. Like, what's going on? Something's happening. And I just got this overwhelming sense of fear and panic and taking everything so personally. It was personal that I got laid off. It was personal that they didn't pick me. I wasn't worthy. I wasn't good enough. No one had said that to me, but that's what was going on in my mind. And the longer that I was home alone, the more the lies in my brain had convinced me how unworthy and unneeded and unnecessary I was. And I really started to spiral to a very dark place. And eventually that led, once I was able to get semi out of it, to me realigning priorities and realizing that I had this voice and I had built this community, and maybe I wanted to pursue that instead of being with animals. And so I started toying with this idea of I've sacrificed so much in life to get this animal job, but maybe I want to do something else, question mark, that I didn't get my degree in and I'm not paying student loans towards, so like I was at this like fork in the road almost.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I know there's a lot of listeners that are hearing some of the same self-doubt talk in their own heads. So I think by you sharing it, you're really helping people that are listening right now, because they're like, oh my God, that's me. So it's really important that you share your message. And I'm so glad that you do that fearlessly today, because it's so important to kind of like normalize it and say, you know what, we all have those conversations with ourselves in our heads, to kind of normalize it and say like, yeah, I got that too, right? And there's strength in numbers. And I think that goes
Mhm.
into the community that you're trying to build. And then in 2021, you started this mental health podcast. It's called Sunshine and Rainbows. So what's your goal with this podcast? Who do you have on as guests?
Yeah. So I love what you said earlier about how everyone on social media is comparing the highlight reel.
Mm.
And something I like to talk about is how you are comparing someone's best day to your behind the scenes. So you know what's going on in your life. And like that self-doubt, everything I talked about earlier, that's what you're thinking about in your life. Whereas you're looking at the perfectly filtered, curated aesthetic photo or video or Instagram, whatever, that someone else has spent hours to put there to look perfect. I know from experience because I have to do the same thing in order to work with brands. And so I started this podcast, Sunshine and Rainbows, with the tagline that it's not always sunshine and rainbows. And the world perpetuates this perfectionism highlight reel. But in reality, that's not real life. And it's okay. It's okay that that's not real life. And so I bring on guests to talk about moments in life where they've had to pivot or change their opinions or change their mindset to overcome either everyday things that we go through or some pretty challenging instances. And the goal with that is to change mindsets, open up mindsets, and hopefully continue breaking stigmas in all facets.
Yeah, this is so needed. I mean, obviously I have an Instagram account and I follow a whole bunch of people. One particular guy that I know, like he's posting these great photos of his family and his kids. And meanwhile, in real life, I know he's going through a divorce and he just lost his job. And I'm like, what are you posting right now? I'm like,
Yep.
what is going on? But to the outside observer that doesn't really know what's going on in his life, everything looks perfect. Everything looks like sunshine and rainbows, right?
Well, and that's the hard thing is that, and that's why I started the podcast, is because on Instagram, like I said, I work with brands.
Hmm.
They still want captions a certain way. They still want photos a certain way to sell a product. And while it's my voice and I'm authentic and I say what I want, there's still a certain way I have to present it. With the podcast, I don't do ads. It is my voice and I'm able to say what I want, and guests have the freedom to do the same. So I'm hoping that it's just another layer of that authenticity that I feel like everyone is really striving for.
Yeah, I love it. Then later in 2021, now all of a sudden you start this author journey with this whimsical and colorful children's book series. It reaches Amazon's #1 bestseller list. So what was your goal in putting out these children's books?
Yeah. So are you catching on to the kind of like serial entrepreneur vibes? Because
Yeah,
I
I'm
am.
totally
And
getting it.
every time someone like brings up, and then you do this, and then you do this, I'm just like, oh God, here it comes. Like
I'm
it's my
over
mental illness creeping in.
it.
We'll get to that. But yes, so I started this children's book series. It's called Manda's Magical Zoo. The first book is called Jumo the Unicorn, which reached the bestsellers list on Amazon. Blew me away. But again, just a testament to community that supports me and loves me. The book is about, again, opening up mindsets, inclusivity. It's based on the little rhino that I got to work with at the zoo. And so there's just amazing characters that support the story of friendship, empathy, inclusivity and bravery. And the second book is actually coming out April 7th. So we're continuing the series. Yeah.
Good for you. I absolutely love that. Listen, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm always thinking about the next big idea. I love fraternity and sorority life. I love working with college students. So I think that I finally found my home and kind of my new identity for this chapter of life.
Yeah.
I hope that I do this until the day that I'm no longer physically on this earth. If I'm involved with Greek University, I'm going to be a very, very happy man if that's the case. So I love all the different things that you're involved with. I think it's fantastic. But eventually you finally found this psychiatrist that would actually listen to all the symptoms that you've been describing here. And so how did your life eventually get clear, get aligned, and under control?
Yeah. So it actually had to get to the worst it had ever been. And in high school, I'd experienced depression. I had experienced anxiety. We talked about it in college, even in my post-grad life. But once I started working from home and my structure went away from my typical job and my body was able to slow down, I wasn't able to distract myself from my brain any longer. And that's when all of my mental illnesses started catching up with me, which is a really scary thing. In college, what I thought was extroverted and overachiever and ability to stay up really late and pull nighters all the time ended up being a really big part of the mental illness I was eventually diagnosed with. And like you said, everything was perfect on Instagram and I was sharing, but I just kept slipping deeper and deeper and deeper into this dark, dark place. And again, having panic attacks, feeling exhausted, just brushing my teeth. I eventually told my husband that it was exhausting to exist, which had never come out of my mouth before. And as you can see right now, I'm a very happy, joyful, extroverted person. And I eventually told him that I need to be in public right now because if I'm not around people, I will just start crying. And I don't know how everyone else on this earth is living because there's no way everyone else feels like me. This feels wrong. I don't feel okay. And I kept begging my primary care that something is wrong. I feel off. She's like, well, it's a pandemic. Everyone's depressed. Everyone's overweight. You're working at home. There's nothing wrong with you. We ran all these tests. She just kept upping my depression meds, upping it, upping it. I was on the max dose of Zoloft at 29 years old. Again, everything in my life seemed like I was thriving. I was like, this doesn't make sense. And so finally I walked in one day and was like, I need a psychiatrist. I need a referral. You're not listening to me. Something is wrong. So I went to the psychiatrist's office and got the diagnosis that I officially have major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, adult onset ADHD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and bipolar 2 disorder. And from that moment, I like to say that that diagnosis saved my life because I was able to get on the correct medication that is drastically, I've done a 180 since last September.
Yeah, I am so happy to hear that. And good for you for advocating for your own health and not accepting, wrong diagnosis or people not even listening to what
Yeah.
you had to say. Like we all have to be our own best advocates. I mean, we know our body, we know our minds better than anybody else does around us. So we just have to advocate. And if we don't feel like we're getting the right help, then go somewhere else. I mean, even when you're talking about a psychiatrist, maybe you have, a really good relationship with this person that you're talking to, or maybe the psychiatrist is not the right person for you. Like, just as
Yes.
in relationships, right? It's like sometimes you just immediately gel and everything is working perfectly. And other times you're like, okay, this isn't working. Like, I need to try something different, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just happy that you're in such a better place right now. The college students who are listening right now, I want to make sure that they understand what the warning signs are that they should be watching out for in their fraternity brothers, their sorority sisters, or even just other students on campus. What should they be looking for?
Yeah. So that's the tricky thing is, like I said, the warning signs that I was exhibiting in college directly lined up with the culture that I was involved in and what was popular then. My excessively high euphoric moods had to do with the fact that I was surrounded by people that loved me and supported me, and I felt great. My extreme irritability came with the fact that I was depriving myself of sleep, maybe not eating the correct foods, exhausted. Again, I made some risky decisions and I had substance abuse. But in some sorority and fraternity environments, that's the norm, that's the status quo. And so these clues that should have clued me or others in, I had no idea until I got out of that environment that I realized, oh, okay, this might be concerning. And according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, students with bipolar in college are 70% more likely to drop out because these warning signs aren't caught and they're not handled properly. And it gets to a point, like I said last summer, where you just feel like you're drowning and you can't get out.
Yeah. I mean, heavy substance abuse, like you were talking about, whether that be alcohol or drugs, I think is definitely one sign for sure that fraternity and sorority members need to get involved. Because typically what I see, and listen, I'm not naive. I know that college students are going to drink alcohol. I don't preach abstinence. I understand that it's going to happen. And I'm a little bit more realistic. I give students the tools they need
Mm-hmm.
before they go out, when they go out, and when they come home to make sure that they're safe. All of that being said, if we see heavy substance abuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs, many times students are trying to cover up something. It could be trauma that they experienced before they even got to college.
Yep.
It could be a whole bunch of things, but typically they're basically just trying to numb that and not really deal with that particular situation, whatever trauma they went through. So the alcohol or drugs is a way to essentially numb that. And so I think if we see that, then that's certainly evidence to say that, hey, maybe we need to get involved here because I'm seeing that our fraternity brother or our sorority sister is heavily using alcohol or drugs on a regular basis. And we need to get them the help that they need, right?
Yeah. Honestly, and as horrible as it is, college can be the perfect melting pot for bipolar disorder. Half
Mhm.
of bipolar, they believe, is hereditary. The other half is brought out by high stress, trauma, and substance abuse. And again, depending on the environment that you're surrounding yourself in, that can be the perfect recipe. And for me, looking back, that is when it really started rearing its ugly head. And again, like you said, I encourage, talk to your friends, start these conversations, say, hey, you seem a little more withdrawn than usual. Can I help you? Can I be intentionally a friend to you? Not just, hey, how are you doing? Good. Okay, awesome. You need to be asking these leading questions and really get to know the people around you.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that completely. It's all too easy to basically just blow somebody off when they're like, hey, what's up? Not much, right? I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
need to, it's almost automatic. You don't even think about the answer. So, we really have to probe a little bit and start asking them, like, how are you feeling? Like,
Yeah.
start asking some more probing questions, especially if you're seeing evidence that, maybe they've been holed up in their room for 3 days and haven't come out. They aren't showering, they're not eating properly, they're not sleeping properly. I mean, all of these things I think are, potential issues that warrant at least a conversation, like at
Yeah.
least at a minimum.
But
Um,
again, the funny part is everything you're describing was me during finals week.
yeah,
And
it's
and
true.
again, it's so tricky because pulling all-nighters, wow, you're a great student. But is it because you're have insomnia because your night terrors are keeping you up at night? And that's where it's so tricky.
It is. It is. Let's assume that somebody is experiencing some kind of mental health issue. They're a college student. Where can they go in order to get help?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of resources on campus and off campus. I personally utilize my therapy and counseling services on campus. I did not have my own insurance. I was on my parents' insurance, and that was provided. As a student, I was able to take care of those free resources. They didn't know me. Couldn't tell anyone about what I was telling them, because that's amazing thing about these professionals is unless you're a danger to yourself or society, they can't tell your sorority sisters about the drama that's going on. Also, just student centers, student health centers, campus advocacy and support groups are an incredible tool to take care of as well. And then again, there's even off-campus resources as well, too: therapy, counseling, psychiatrist office. it shouldn't be shameful to take medication, because just like you would take Advil for a headache, or people with diabetes take medication to survive, if your brain has different chemistry, it's okay to take that medication to keep you alive.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying it. It's such an important message that you have, and I think you gave some great resources there. You're already paying for all these resources, in the counseling center at your
Yeah.
university, in your tuition. You might as well take advantage of it and use them. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you there. And I think the confidentiality piece is probably another reason why a lot of students don't go there. Yes, there's stigma wrapped into going into that building. So I think we need to think about like telehealth and other ways that we can
Yeah.
get, therapy and other things without physically going to the building where that's happening. But also the fact that it's all paid for and it's confidential and they're not going to talk to your parents or your sorority sisters about what's going on. That's huge. I mean, we all want to know that we can have a conversation in confidence and it's not going to be broadcast to the whole world.
Yep.
So yeah, I totally get that. So what's next for you? What's next for Amanda Young? What do you want to be doing?
Oh my goodness. So I did mention my next children's book that's coming out April 7th. It's the prequel to the series. I just want to keep going up. I just want to keep reaching people and continue advocating for mental health, and obviously bipolar disorder. It's very close to my heart. Someday I would love to have my own book. I would love to talk about my own story. I would love to speak and continue reaching people at conferences or at colleges that want to hear this story. Again, college age kids are when it matters. That's the age that it really matters. And yeah, just keep going up.
I love it. Well, keep leading with your heart. Keep telling your story. I think it's one that needs to continuously be told. So I think you're definitely on the right path. There's no question in my mind. I'm going to be seeing you on stages all across the country. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That I could say, you know what? I know when we had this conversation. So that's really cool. Now, we do love great food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. And I know you are in the Tampa Bay area that has a lot of really good food. What's your favorite restaurant these days?
Ooh, my favorite restaurant right now is called Fresh Kitchen. They're a conglomerate that owns a lot of different restaurants in Tampa, but I just love the ability of how they make food that is so healthy, taste so good. I'm all about it.
That sounds absolutely delicious. So I'm gonna have to take a ride. I live in Nashville, so I'll have to take a
Okay.
ride out to Tampa Bay and have some of that. Have a bunch of friends that are in the area, so they're gonna let me know if that was a good choice. But I think you have good taste, so I am gonna trust you on that restaurant pick. I love it. So where can our listeners go to connect with you, to check out the podcast, ultimately to bring you to their campus to speak? Where should they go?
Yeah, so you can find me everywhere online at That Manda Girl. My website is the same, thatmandagirl.com. And then if you're interested in my book series, Manda's Magical Zoo, on Amazon, and my podcast is Sunshine and Rainbows Pod, you can find it everywhere you listen to a podcast for free.
That man's a girl. I absolutely love everything that you're doing with the branding. Love your attitude. I love everything about you. It's important what you do. So make sure you keep sharing that story. But this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story and hopefully just reach one person.
That's it. If we can just reach one person, then our job is done. So thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners. Make sure that you like and share Amanda's story with other fraternity and sorority members on your campus. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks for checking us out. We'll see you soon.